Digital noise drowns souls seeking truth. Life's deepest maps, not from trends, but ancient wisdom. They were recorded thousands of years ago in the pages of the Holy Bible. Welcome to Scroll to Soul. We don't just read the text. We decode the real-world execution strategy for the modern era. If you are ready to stop being a passive observer and start building a life rooted in deep wisdom and intentional action, you are in the right place. You are now among the practitioners. Let's unlock today's blueprint. When we observe the modern economic landscape, we are constantly reminded of the volatility of markets. We watch as inflation rises, interest rates fluctuate, and industries undergo sudden contractions. For most individuals and businesses, a financial crisis represents a period of extreme danger where the primary goal is simple survival. The common playbook during a downturn is to cut expenses, halt all capital deployment, and wait for better conditions to return. But the elite builders of history do not operate on standard survival scripts. They recognize that a systemic crisis is actually the premier environment for capturing market share, generating asymmetric returns, and establishing permanent long-term dominance. This is the core premise of the Isaac paradox, a profound economic blueprint recorded in the 26th chapter of the book of Genesis. It details how a single strategic leader generated massive, unprecedented returns on investment in the middle of a catastrophic national famine. To understand this strategy, we must first examine the environment of Gerar, where the crisis unfolded. The text opens by stating that there was a severe famine in the land, in addition to the previous famine that had occurred during the lifetime of Abraham. This was not a minor, temporary market correction. It was a prolonged, deep agricultural collapse that threatened the survival of every active enterprise in the region. The standard response during such a crisis was flight. For generations, whenever a famine struck Canaan, the established solution was to pack up your entire operations, gather your livestock, and travel south to Egypt. Egypt was the ultimate established market of the ancient world. It possessed the reliable, consistent water resource of the Nile River, which insulated its economy from the droughts that devastated surrounding nations. Egypt represented safety, stability, and predictable capital preservation. Isaac, who inherited a massive corporate organization from his father Abraham, naturally prepared to follow this exact historical script, moving to Gerar with the intention of using it as a transit station on his way to Egypt. But as Isaac prepared to cross the border, the Creator intervened with a direct operational command. He was told explicitly not to go down to Egypt, but to remain in the land where he was directed to stay. Isaac was promised that if he stayed in this dry, crisis-ridden territory, he would receive absolute backing, divine protection, and an expansion of his generational territory. This command introduces the first major pillar of the Isaac paradox, strategic geographic placement during a macro crisis. Egypt represented a congested, competitive red ocean. It was a market flooded with desperate refugees and businesses fleeing the same famine, leading to high transaction costs, low margins, and severe regulatory hurdles. By staying in Gerar, Isaac was remaining in an underpopulated, high-risk territory, where competition was virtually non-existent. This teaches the modern practitioner a vital lesson. During an economic downturn, your natural instinct is to flee toward the most crowded, established safe havens. But true opportunity lies in staying exactly where others are fleeing, finding the hidden gaps in the very markets that everyone else is abandoning. The ultimate display of Isaac's operational courage is recorded in verse 12 of Genesis 26. The scripture states that Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold, because the Creator blessed him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. Let us analyze the sheer audacity of this action. Isaac did not merely survive the famine by rationing his existing resources. He actively sowed crops in dry, cracked earth during a period of severe drought. In an agricultural society, seed is not just food. Seed represents your primary capital reserves. If you consume your seed to survive today, you guarantee your future bankruptcy. If you plant your seed in dry ground during a drought, you run the immense risk of losing your entire investment if the rain does not fall. It was an act of extreme calculated risk that went against all conventional wisdom of the day. Yet Isaac chose to deploy his capital counter-cyclically. While his competitors were hoarding their remaining resources or consuming their seed capital just to survive, Isaac was systematically burying his capital into the ground. He understood that during a severe downturn, the cost of asset acquisition is at its lowest point. Land was abundant, labor was cheap, and the market was completely empty of active producers. By planting when no one else dared to plant, Isaac positioned himself as the sole producer in a market characterized by infinite demand and zero supply. When the harvest arrived, he did not just make a standard profit. He captured an unprecedented hundredfold return on his investment, completely transforming his economic positioning. For the modern professional, this is the absolute rule of countercyclical deployment. When your sector faces a severe downturn, that is your exact cue to deploy your reserves. You do not freeze in fear. You plant your seed in the areas where others see only dry ground, knowing that the most massive wealth transfers occur when you produce while the rest of the world is too terrified to try. However, immediate success always breeds immediate competitive friction. As Isaac's wealth expanded, the surrounding Philistines grew deeply envious of his progress. The text records that Isaac became so powerful that the Philistines stopped up all the wells that his father Abraham's servants had dug, filling them completely with dirt. Furthermore, Abimelech, the regional ruler, approached Isaac and ordered him to leave their territory, stating that Isaac had become far too powerful for them. This is a realistic look at market friction. When you execute a superior strategy and generate massive returns, you must expect your competitors to react with envy, sabotage, and direct interference. Filling Isaac's wells with dirt was a highly targeted strike against his critical operational infrastructure. In a semi-arid region, wells are the lifeblood of livestock and agricultural operations. By blocking the wells, the Philistines were attempting to cut off Isaac's water supply, cripple his production, and force his entire organization into bankruptcy. Notice how Isaac responded to this direct operational sabotage. He did not launch an expensive, destructive military campaign to punish the Philistines, nor did he waste his energy arguing with Abimelech. He understood that fighting petty battles with small-minded competitors is a massive drain on your focus and your resources. Isaac simply packed up his tents and relocated to the valley of Gerar. He chose to preserve his operational focus and protect his capital rather than winning a temporary argument. When you face professional jealousy, malicious rumors, or competitive sabotage in your career, you must follow this exact operational script. Do not waste your valuable time trying to fight back or vindicate yourself to critics. Your focus must remain entirely on execution. If an environment becomes toxic or highly restricted, you simply pack up your operations, preserve your assets, and relocate to a territory where you can build without constant friction. Your ultimate revenge against your critics is the unshakable scale of your continued success. In his new location, Isaac did not try to reinvent the wheel. Verse 18 records that Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died, and he gave them the same names his father had given them. This is a brilliant lesson in leveraging existing assets and historical data. Before Isaac spent his energy exploring uncharted territory for new water sources, he went back to the proven locations. He knew that his father Abraham had successfully located and developed these water assets years ago. By redigging these ancestral wells, Isaac was accessing reliable water sources with minimal exploration risk and lower operational costs. He revived dormant assets that already had a proven track record of success. In business and personal development, we often fall into the trap of constantly chasing the newest trend, while completely ignoring the proven frameworks that worked in the past. When faced with a crisis, your first step should be to look at your historical foundations. Reopen the classic methods of customer service, activate your dormant professional networks, and lean back on the core skills that built your initial success. You do not need a complex new formula when the old wells are simply waiting to be cleared of dirt. But Isaac's team did not stop at reviving old assets. They continued to innovate and expand. Isaac's servants dug in the valley and discovered a fresh well of springing water. Immediately, the local herdsmen of Gerar argued with Isaac's herdsmen, claiming the water belonged to them. So Isaac named the well Esek, which means dispute, because they argued with him. He did not stay to fight. He dug another well, but they argued over that one also, so he named it Sitnah, which means opposition. Finally, he moved on from there and dug yet another well, and no one argued over it. He named it Rehoboth, which means open spaces, declaring that the Creator had finally made room for them to be fruitful in the land. This persistent well digging is the ultimate model for navigating market friction. ESEC represents the initial dispute you face when you launch a new initiative. SITNA represents the active opposition that intensifies as you refuse to back down. Most people quit at ESEC or SITNA, assuming that the conflict is a sign that they should stop trying. But the true practitioner knows that persistent execution always outlasts temporary opposition. By refusing to engage in useless arguments and simply continuing to dig, Isaac eventually reached Rehoboth, an uncontested space of absolute freedom and market dominance. You must keep digging your wells until you find your Rehoboth. Knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. A life of true impact is built entirely through execution. And that brings us to today's practitioner challenge. Look at your own path, your decisions, and your interactions this week. Identify the single biggest area where passive habits are holding you back, and actively apply the exact scriptural framework we unpacked today. Act now. Share your progress. We are the practitioners. Ignite your legacy. Subscribe. Ring the bell. In our next video, we are diving into another foundational principle. Until then, keep executing.